Hi y'all, Merry Vlogmas. So yesterday's Vlogmas was a little snafu and you might not have seen my reveal of what I got in my Stitchmas box very well. So this is a full close-up of what came for day 8. This is a Tenzian needle. Claudia knows what that is, so she's gonna have to give me little lessons on how to do this one. But you crochet this little pattern and then you have a hanger to hang it on, which is adorable. I love this hanger. I think it'll be a really fun addition to my Christmas decorations or a gift for someone. Now, today is day 9. So let's see what's in day 9. Oh, how adorable. It's a little Hobby Lobby keychain, which is on a Christmas sweater. It says, "Follow me to Hobby Lobby." And this is a stitch measure regulator thing, gauge, a stitch, a yarn and crochet hook gauge. So it's so cool. Here, if you have this size yarn, then use this size hook. So each little hole lines up with the size of yarn, and then it tells you what size hook to use. And then also here you can measure to make sure that you're keeping your stitches correctly per inch or however you want to measure your project. So this is a really useful tool. So what's on the agenda today? Claudia and I are going to be baking Swedish/Finnish coffee bread, cardamom coffee bread. It is a tradition that we grew up with, and my mom passed down to me how to make it, and she passed down to Claudia how to make it. Claudia went to pastry school for a bit, and she makes really good cardamom bread and is here to help me today so that I don't mess it up. So stay tuned and watch the cardamom making day. Thanks, y'all. Hi y'all, Merry Vlogmas. Today I have on my Christmas apron, so that means it's a baking day. Claudia and I will be making our Christmas tradition of coffee bread. So my grandparents were direct immigrants from Finland. And in Finland and in Sweden, this is a very common bread that they make all the time. We only make it at Christmas time. I grew up attending a Swedish church, and this was a tradition that we always served during the Santa Lucia festival. We served coffee bread. So my mom got this recipe passed down to her from the old time Swedes. So I do have a picture of the recipe that I'll be attaching, but what you do first is we have 4 whole eggs beaten, sitting here ready to go. We've got our yeast proofing, and you need 4.5 teaspoons of the yeast. So the yeast that I got is the active dry yeast, so we did have to add a little water and proof it. It's not the instant yeast. If I would have put in instant yeast, I wouldn't have had to proof it. I could have skipped that stage, but I bought the wrong kind of yeast, so it's okay. Then in this pot is 3 cups of milk. The recipe calls for scalding the milk, but that is kind of an old-fashioned thing before they pasteurize the milk. So you don't have to scald it anymore, but you do have to heat it to get the butter to melt. And then we have 1.5 sticks of butter in here, and it's all melted. We added 1.5 cups of granulated sugar already, and we added 1 round teaspoon of salt. And the next thing we added is the spice cardamom. And that's what makes it so amazing, is the cardamom spice. So the recipe actually calls for 3 teaspoons of cardamom. We like our bread to really taste cardamom-y, so we actually added 7 teaspoons of cardamom this year. So I'll let you know how it is after we try it. So now the milk and the butter, it's just kind of cooling off for a minute. The yeast is almost proofed. We needed to do that for about 5 minutes. The eggs are ready to go. Next we're gonna do is mix all of our ingredients in with flour. And then we're going to take our dough out of the bowl that we did the mixing in, and we're going to put it in a big plastic Tupperware bowl that's lightly sprayed with Pam. And we're gonna let it rise. And usually you have to let it rise for about an hour. It's until it's about double in size, but it usually takes about an hour. So I'll see you back in just a minute. This is what the yeast looks like when it's proofed and ready to be added. And here is our liquid ingredients that we cooked on the stove. This has to be completely cooled, so it needs to be at room temperature. If you don't wait for it to be completely cooled, it will cook your eggs and your yeast will die. So this step is really, really important to make sure you're patient and follow. Next step, you're gonna add your flour slowly. Add and mix, keep mixing and add it slowly. So this bag of flour, it's an all-purpose flour, and it's actually by King Arthur Baking Company, which is a really amazing flour. So I'm just adding some, and then I'm mixing really well, and then I'll keep adding. So this bag we figured out is about 7.5 cups of flour. It calls for between 10 and 12 cups of flour. The difference is because you always just go by feel more than your exact measurements. There's so much humidity difference in the air that you have to just do your dough by feel. So we're just gonna keep adding, keep stirring, and I'll show you what it looks like when I've got enough flour in it. So it might take 2 of those bags of flour. So they weigh about 2 pounds. So it probably won't take 2 full bags, but it might. And so at the very most, you would need 4 pounds of flour to make this. And each batch makes 6 loaves. So we're making 12 loaves of bread today. Everybody in our family will get a couple of loaves, so that's 6 loaves right there. So now that I'm getting closer to the end of the flour, I know there's 7.5 cups in right now. So I'm going to pour out, this is a 2-cup measurer. So adding this would make it 9.5 cups. Now, it's super important not to overmix. My daughter went to culinary school for baking and pastry, and so she said we have to be really careful not to overmix. If you overmix, then your gluten starts to break down and it will not turn out. And if it's humid, you have to actually add more flour, not less flour. So that's something she learned at culinary school. So now I'm gonna show you what it looks like at 9.5 cups. Now keep in mind, your 9.5 cup dough might look completely different than mine. So this definitely is not enough flour yet. So I'm gonna just put another cup of flour in my measuring cup, so then I will know that it's at 10.5 cups. Okay, so here's another cup. I'm adding it slowly. Just kind of sprinkle it around when I'm adding it. And then I'm gonna go ahead and stir that in. We always stir it by hand. We don't use the mixer for this bread at all. You have to do it with just a wooden spoon or a spatula, and you do it by hand. Ooh, it's starting to get there a little. What do you think, Claude?
I think it looks good. Just mix it a little more.
And sometimes when it gets down to the very end, you have to mix with your hands, and it can make your hands rather sticky. But see how it's like sticking together and forming, it can actually form a ball in the bowl. It's not just a big blob, but I can actually make a ball now. You think a little more, Claude?
A little more.
Okay. So I'm just gonna put a half a cup in.
Maybe even less. It's too much.
That's 3/4 cups amount. Okay, that's a half a cup. So now I'm just gonna sprinkle a little on. I'll do a 1/4 of a cup to start. Stir it in really well. So if I add this whole half a cup, that will put me right at 11 cups. Make sure you get it all incorporated on the sides. You see how I'm trying to work it on the sides? It gives your arms a little workout mixing all this dough. When we double a batch, we like to do it in 2 different bowls. So like I'm making a bowl of it and Claudia's making a bowl. We don't like to put a double batch all in the same bowl because from experience, it hasn't turned out. All right, so Claudia, the expert, because she's helped her grandmother make this a ton, says it's done. So I'm gonna show you. She felt it with her hands. So it's sticking a little bit to my fingers, but when you go like this, it's a little bit sticky, but it definitely can form a ball. All right, so now at the end, I'm mixing with my hands. We did end up adding just a little bit more. It was getting too sticky on my fingers. You want it to be mixed well and not sticky on your fingers, but just like this stickiness is from the other dough. But so you don't want it to be too sticky on your fingers, but you don't want it to be like dry either. Does that make sense? So this is perfect right here. You agree, Claude? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna stop mixing because I don't wanna overmix, and I'm gonna go transfer it to the bowl that is lightly greased with Pam now and let it sit and rise. The house is warm due to the heater. We're not going to proof it in the oven. We did that one year and that did not work well. So I would not suggest proofing it in the oven, but we're just gonna let it sit on the stove with a damp tea towel over the top of it, let it rise for about an hour. Make sure there's no drafts in your house, your heater's on, and your house is nice and warm. All right, the dough rose to more than double in size. We let it rise for about an hour and a half. And now we're kind of kneading it a bit, or you can punch it down. This makes 6 loaves. So we're gonna take it and divide it evenly into 6 pieces. And each of those pieces, we're gonna have to divide into 3 pieces to braid. So we're gonna get a total of 18 pieces out of this dough. So here's Claudia. This is a bench scraper. Okay, so here's Claudia dividing it first in half, and then each half will get divided into 3. And then each of we try to keep it as equal as possible. And then each of these 3 pieces will get divided into 3 more pieces. All right, you can see each piece now gets divided again into 3 pieces. So we're, Claudia's dog keeps jumping on this chair. and then she's gonna eat some of this dough. So we are making 3 loaves on each cookie sheet, and we lined the cookie sheets with parchment paper. And this is going to rise again, so we don't need to turn the oven on yet. So we're just kind of separating it all out so we've got room to make our braids. You can put some on here. We need some flour on our hands. All right, so next you're gonna take one of your sections and you're gonna roll it like a snake. And it's gotta be a pretty long snake because you're gonna be braiding. So you just kind of keep rolling it. You can kind of squeeze to stretch. I do that sometimes. My hands are lightly floured. My dough is a little bit stickier than normal, but it should still be fine. So I'm just kind of squeezing it to make a longer snake. This is about a good size. Now I'm pinching it together at the top. So I've got my 3 pieces rolled like a snake. And then I just start braiding, just like you braid a piece of hair or a section of hair, whatever. So you're just braiding, braiding, braiding. When you get down to the end, you pinch it a little together. And then I am going to just kind of set all of it right here. And that's how it looks. Now I'm gonna repeat it, put one in the center and one on the end. All right, Claude reminded me that when you braid, it's best to do a loose braid. When you braid it too tightly, it does not rise very well. So see how she's doing a very loose braid? These are just things that we've learned through experience of making this bread for so many years. Okay, there you go, a nice loose braid. Look, Coco's Claudia's helper. She keeps jumping on the chair, wanting to help out, i.e. wanting to sample the bread. Coco, leave it.